video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and today might be a bit strange, right? I'm gonna respectfully disagree with Tony the Bull here. And I was kind of hesitant about doing this, to be honest, because I have nothing but respect for Tony and Tony's work. This is not me supposed to be saying I'm right and he's wrong, okay? This is just an intellectual exercise. That's all this really is, okay? Tony has presented what I believe is quite a compelling case for downside in the coming weeks and months for Bitcoin. And I want to acknowledge that. I'm not trying to say he's wrong. I'm not trying to say his analysis is incorrect. His analysis is factually objective, right? That's what he's presenting. But there's some weird things going on in the market at the moment, okay? First of all, people keep asking me, hey Camel, what do you think of Tony the Bull flipping bearish, right? And this is largely the reason I wanted to cover this, because I think somebody needs to say it, right? It is not Tony's job to hold your hand and tell you everything's going to be okay, right? People are kind of acting as if Tony owes them something, right? Like, oh, Tony, how can you be bearish, bro? I put my faith and trust in you that you were going to bull post and, like, you know, relentlessly to the upside, and now they're flipping bearish. I'm getting upset about it, right? That's not Tony's job. Tony's a CMT. His job is to look at the charts, look at it from, frankly, 100 more angles than I personally look at charts, right? I feel very, very left curve compared to Tony. I look at about 4 or 5 things and I say, well, so far trend line not broken, right? Or so far cycle not failed. That's all I really use. But realistically, Tony uses a significantly more complex and thorough methodology than I do. And so when Tony comes out and says, hey guys, I see a whole heap of alarm bells starting to ring here. I see a whole heap of signals that are objectively somewhat neutral to bearish at least. We can't burn him at the stake for being bearish all of a sudden or leaning slightly more bearish than he once did. For all we know, everything he's talking about right now is going to turn out to be 100% correct. And for all we know, he's basically the only guy that nails the top. Right? If we actually have seen the top and we move into a bear market, then I don't know anyone else that has done this correctly. I know a whole heap of retail accounts that were screaming this thing has topped the entire way up and are now screaming it's topped again. But frankly, their opinions don't matter because they have not got the kind of track record that Tony does. Tony's opinion carries a lot more weight than almost everyone's. And that's why people get upset with him when he suddenly says, hey guys, time to maybe lighten up a bit, right? Hey guys, time to start being defensive. Hey guys, time to start maybe entertaining some downside scenarios. So this is not me saying I know better. This is not me saying I'm going to be right and he's going to be wrong or anything. The absolute truth is nobody knows, okay? But I did think as an intellectual exercise, we could look at what Tony's seeing and I could tell you why I, a completely different person, has a slightly different opinion and viewpoint. Before we get into this, I wanted to point to this, okay? And just as a friendly reminder, ask you to do the basics correctly, okay? If you want to be a trader, you must cut your losses quickly. You must allow the profits to run bigger than your losses. You must risk no more than 2% of your account per trade. And if you can last more than 3 or 4 years doing this, you will eventually figure it out, okay? But there's no way you get past 3 or 4 years without doing the above 3. So I think Tony's got a very compelling case at the moment. And again, let me be really, really clear, okay? I've got nothing but respect for Tony and Tony's work. This is not supposed to be a us versus them type deal. In fact, I think you can always tell a rookie trader from an experienced one when they start to say, hey Camel, what are your thoughts on this, right? What do you mean my thoughts? I give you my thoughts every single day. You know what my thoughts are, right? What do you want me to say? Like, nah, he's wrong, bro, right? That's not how this works. So Tony is showing here that we've got these kind of timing cycles at the bottom that have timed these major lows, okay? And also that we've got the tops come in right in the middle of each one of these timing arcs. Now, if true, that is potentially the top. He's also making the case here that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we've got equal length, or roughly speaking equal length, of the 1 and the 5, with 3 being roughly double the length, which again speaks to potentially this being completed here. Now again, if this is completed here, what we're going to see is a rollover and a breakdown, and that really was the top. And so I know people don't want to hear this necessarily, but again, this is just objective data. Until we've seen more candles, then we have no idea what comes next. We can, however, see a breakdown from here and be able to look back and say, well, yeah, we had 5 waves up, and the tops fell right in the middle of each of the arcs. That just so happened to fall right in the middle of the arc as well. Tony for a long time was talking about potentially seeing the inauguration date be the top, and so far it actually seems like that was correct. Okay, now again, you can't penalise the man for having a neutral to bearish lean here when I saw Tony calling for this weeks and weeks and weeks in advance, months in fact. There's the tweet down here, the 12th of November. okay? Buy the election, sell the inauguration. So all he did was have a thesis and then reflect back on this thesis and say, you know what, made a lot of sense at the time, it makes even more sense now. So far, objectively speaking, and remember that's the key word here, objectively speaking, that's it. Okay, the top is so far on inauguration day. So a pretty nice call. And again, I think this is why people get really upset with him, because his track record tells you that you probably don't want to be fading him here, right? So far, hard for me to disagree. I think he's just presenting objective data, and so far it seems to be the case. But this is some of the reason I wanted to bring this up today, because I have a slightly different interpretation to what I am seeing here than Tony does. So the next thing Tony is pointing out, this is the 4-year cycles on the monthly time frame, and you can see the green areas mark the bear market lows, bear market lows, bear market lows, bear market lows, and then right in the middle of each of these arcs, we get this area of maximum market risk, which here saw the top come in, okay? And here, again, we're going to come back to this. Here we saw the top come in. And so again, it may well be the case that we have seen the top come in right in the middle of this timing arc. Now, this is the interesting thing about trading, right? Nobody knows until we get further into the future. So this could absolutely be a perfect top call. We could enter a bear market here, trend down into this green bar. And this is why Tony continues to say things like we should start to manage risk here. We should start to think about taking some off the table. But again, just as an intellectual exercise here, and as somebody who I only really use cycles, as you know, if you've been following me for any length of time at all, I think it's worth pointing out here, okay, that yes, risk is extremely high once we get past the midpoint of these 4-year cycles. But from here, Bitcoin went from about 3K when it, or less, right, 1.5, 2K when it first entered this timing band in red, to 20K. And whilst risk was elevated here, we still saw super performance and the best performance of the entire cycle. Okay, all of this destroyed the performance from the lows to this point here, which tells me to keep an open mind about potentially still having gains forward past this pink zone. Doesn't mean there's not risk here. Doesn't mean this isn't later in the cycle. And the later we go, the more sense it makes to start looking for tops. It made no sense whatsoever to start calling tops here like many people did. It made no sense this early in the cycle to start calling tops, right? Even here, it was like, well, we're not even halfway through yet. But at this point in time, we're over halfway through, right? We are past this midpoint of this major 4-year cycle. And so in here, if tops are to show up, it's not going to be super surprising in hindsight. Now, again, this is quite compelling at first glance. In the prior cycle, what we saw was we moved up to what was approximately a 65K top right in the midpoint of the cycle. But again, notice how once more, similarly to 2017, we actually put in a new higher high significantly later, right? Months later after this midpoint of the cycle. Now, granted, this was only a marginal higher high, okay? 65, I think, here, and 69 the second time around. But here's why I wanted to bring this up. Again, this is all just intellectual spitballing. Nobody has a clue who's right or wrong here. And I want you to abandon all need for tribalism, okay? There is no I told you so's here. There's no us versus them, okay? This is simply an intellectual exercise. But as we got here, we saw monetary policy move from loose, okay, in here, remember, C19 plunge, Fed bazooka, okay, helicopter money, intense amounts of QE. They create something like 85% of all dollars that have ever existed throughout all of human history in an 18-month window, okay? That's what we got here. But by the time we got to this second peak, the Fed steps in and stops QE, right? It starts to move to tighter monetary policy. All through here, we stopped the extraordinary measures of printing, we stopped Fed balance sheet expansion, and we moved towards tapering the balance sheet. We moved towards balance sheet runoff and quantitative tightening. It's entirely possible, if they didn't step in at this moment in time and reverse QE and start to move from easing to tightening, we would have had that run to 300K plus. It's entirely possible. But as ever, cycles are in control, everything else is narrative. We knew that 4-year cycle low was coming into focus, so it only made sense that they had to step in and start to taper here. But when we fast forward to today, this is why I struggle to get on board with this particular idea. Okay, first of all, we're in the middle of this halfway point, fair enough. Okay, risk is definitely elevated now because we're later in the cycle, agreed. But we've seen it before where it runs significantly further to the right translation. We've seen it before where we get a new high significantly past the midpoint. And thus there is certainly time to see a few more months of upside here and perhaps one final set of higher highs. In addition, monetary policy here is significantly more favourable than it was in this kind of neighbourhood. Okay, right now, we've managed to accomplish all of this bull run for Bitcoin on quantitative tightening, on Fed balance sheet runoff. But we are days away now from entering the month of April. And as we get into April, we are going to see the Fed tapering, right? The quantitative tightening. And here's the key part, the Fed balance sheet runoff, the rate at which they're going to be tapering the balance sheet is going to come down by about 80 to 85%, which of course is akin to QE at the margin. Okay, so unlike here, where the rally got stumped by a pivot, a Fed pivot from easing to tightening, right now we've got the opposite set of conditions. We've got Fed monetary policy beginning the early stages of pivoting from QT to QE. Now, again, I am not one of these people that says print is coming, okay? It is coming, but not until late 2026 in my estimation. I've been extremely consistent in saying that. But objectively speaking, there is still more months left ahead to see an ultra right translated high. Okay, it doesn't mean we will, it just means it's possible, just like we saw here as well. And again, on our side now is monetary policy, more so than it's been since all the way back here. The last time monetary policy was more aligned for more highs in Bitcoin was back here before they switched and started to pivot, okay? This is the first time ever since back here that monetary policy is more conducive to seeing a big upside push in the price of Bitcoin. So whilst I totally agree with everything else we've shown so far from Tony, okay, whilst I totally agree this looks like we could well have completed 5 ways up, whilst I totally agree the timing from a cyclical perspective is essentially perfect so far, and whilst this at the moment is one of the best Bitcoin top calls that I personally am aware of, I don't think I've seen anyone do it better than this. Once we get to here, I kind of start to think to myself, okay, based on my own analysis, there is likely more upside here. Or I should say at least the potential for more upside here. Is the risk higher than ever? Yes. Okay, but again, the risk was higher than ever here, and we still saw new highs thereafter. Very similar look, this time with a curve placed over the top, right? A regression curve. Could it be, okay, that there has picked the top just like it happened every other instance? Could that be the case? Yes, absolutely. But at some point, this thing does have to break to the upside. Now, who knows when it will? It could be this month, next month, right? It could be not until next cycle or even the cycle after, or maybe, just maybe, the trade that no one is thinking about is this is it. Bitcoin's going to fail as an experiment. It's going to be a failed project and it just trends back to zero. Okay, I personally don't believe that, but we can't really rule it out, right? There is uncertainty. If it gets hacked or it breaks or something like that, or Satoshi turns out to be, I don't know, what do you call it? The North Korean government leader or something like that, right? I know this is highly unlikely, but if that's the case, then perhaps this is the ultimate high and we just trend towards zero now. Now, I'm not a person that believes that. I think we have a good chance of breaking this cycle. Okay, I do believe that. But again, the market has to prove that to me. I can't just say, well, yeah, we're betting the farm. I'm 100% sure. Hold my hand and I'll lead you to Valhalla, right? None of us have a clue. We're just doing our best to look at the charts and see what we can find here. But at the moment, that is a perfect rejection at resistance, just like every other top call. Again, the difference between Tony and I is Tony looks at a whole heap of metrics and then pieces together a comprehensive viewpoint. Right? So Tony is looking at all of this stuff and going, I don't know, that's another piece of evidence in his favor to say, maybe we should start to entertain some tops here. And all of this, no doubt, on an LMACD, looking to cross bearish. Hasn't done it yet, but again, it won't take much here, will it? It really won't take much to see a bearish cross. And if it did, I would actually flip bearish myself. I would actually start to think, you know what, this is really, really, really not a good sign. Now, this is monthly chart, monthly time frame. It's going to take some time before we see that cross. And of course, there's still scope to see this thing compress and then continue to expand. Okay, so without the bearish cross, we could see the green histogram start to open up. We could see this push to the upside and break out. And again, that would kind of fit with what I was talking about earlier, particularly if we get some more dovish policy from the Fed, right? More accommodative monetary policy. But again, all very much undetermined at this point, right? Uncertainty remains extremely high right now. We've also got the SMI here, okay, showing another bearish look, another loss of momentum. Now, we could certainly still get a blow off top on major divergence here. That's entirely possible. We could also get this thing tick back up one final time. I don't think that's very likely given the time frame, okay? I think it would be extremely hard to see this thing tick back up. Drawing our eyes back to the prior cycle, we lost all momentum here, but we did still make a higher high. So it's not impossible that we could see higher highs come in. We saw a kind of similar thing back here, right? We saw the last 2 or 3 monthly candles occur on major divergence here. So maybe we could get 2 or 3 monthly candles to the upside on major divergence. But again, this is just an objective piece of evidence to say this is a mathematical representation of momentum in the markets. And it looks an awful lot like we are losing power here, doesn't it? It looks like we are losing steam. It looks like we are losing momentum. Doesn't preclude a move to the upside. Just tells us that this trend is getting weaker as it gets later and later in the major cycles. So notice how so far I'm practically agreeing with everything. I'm just saying there's a shot. right? There's a shot here. Another similar look here with the RSI again on the monthly time frame. And once again, it kind of speaks to the fact that we're losing power and losing momentum here, okay? We've got a major overblown, overbought RSI here that corresponds with the top. Same deal here, massively overbought into the top, massively overbought into the top, massively overbought at least into the first top, then we get the divergence into the second high. And right now, we've not seen any kind of massively overbought, overblown move in the strength here. The underlying strength is nowhere near what we've seen in prior cycles. Also notice each one of these peaks, we're getting lower highs form. Again, it's just objective fact to say that this appears to be losing momentum and losing steam. Doesn't mean we couldn't tick back up. Doesn't mean that the big overblown move is not right around the corner. It might be. But again, we know objectively speaking, we are losing steam here, at least relative to these prior blow off top moves. So then, of course, the question becomes, well, Camel, how is it then you can remain somewhat more optimistic? How is it then, Camel, you haven't yet felt compelled to call a top? How is it that you remain optimistic here, at least in the short term? And the answer is simple, right? If you really think about it, we've had this idea for a long, long time. We would get a weekly cycle low and potentially look to see a double come out of here, right? I've shown this dozens and dozens of times. It's been posted to Twitter before, and it's worked every other cycle, okay? We've also made it extremely clear. We fail this cycle low, and that is me saying, okay, now we have true technical damage. Now we've got a buck of the trend. Now we've got true breakdowns, true technical damage that needs repair. Now we've got Camel finally saying, that's it. Now I have to start truly managing risk, truly respecting the fact that this market probably has topped and Tony probably did absolutely nail it back here with the inauguration call. But I've also been very consistent in saying until such time as we see that, I can't really do it. I can't really call the top because to me, this is a bottoming weekly cycle and all the other weekly cycles have resolved to approximately 100% upside pumps. And as I've shown before, it's actually kind of reasonable to expect this one to be more than 100% and then this one to be more than whatever this one is, right? So until proven otherwise, I can't really sit here and say it's time for me to call the top. I can acknowledge the objective data that Tony has presented here. I can acknowledge that the risk is higher than it's been in the entire cycle. But again, if you've been following me for any length of time, I've been talking about this for weeks and weeks and months, right? All the way back here, I was saying, we've got to watch out. All the way back when we got to the stock market top back here before Christmas, the members know we cut loads and loads of positions here and went flat before Christmas. And then we paid, I think, a stop or two in here. And I remember again making a video and saying, look, when we start to take stops, we have to acknowledge the fact that risk is elevated, right? And we've only just gotten back in after this correction. And only here is this becoming an extremely contrarian trade. But all the way through here, I was saying we need to be extremely cautious, extremely concerned that things could get pretty bad pretty quickly. And everyone was like, nah, no one cares, you're an idiot, right? Only down here, everyone starts calling recessions and bear market. And I'm like, okay, I think there's a counter trend bounce here at least, in the worst case, maybe more, if we're really, really lucky. And if monetary policy is accommodative, as I said earlier on. But again, it's the same thing over and over and over again, right? We fail the cycle and that's it. We've had the top call signals, right? We have to call a top, we have to start being bearish biased, have to start looking for shorts or fades, right? And the same is true of Bitcoin. We've been talking about this over and over and over again. Every man and his dog has got opinions, but how many of you actually have a system that is still keeping you in the trade? Because mine is, right? My system is the cycle lows in, and until we fail it, until we start to truly break down, then I say we respect the cycles, and this is no different to any of the other weekly cycles that, by the way, were also extremely contrarian at the time and also led to massive upside pumps, which we caught on the channel live. So this time is not different, in my estimation, until proven otherwise. I also know there's a bunch of cycle traders out there, El Prez at the moment, that is looking for one final lower low cycle inversion and then a rip, maybe. Okay, if that's true, then we will get a surefire confirmation signal out here. It'd be really horrible for me personally to deal with, but again, we'll take it one day at a time, right? For now, we haven't got to deal with that. For now, it seems an awful lot like this thing is squeezing up and getting ready to break out. As I said a million times, but it's important, we're almost in April where we're going to see monetary policy align for Bitcoin to start to do Bitcoin things again. And all of this, okay, is entirely centered around my strategy, which is get to the weekly cycle low and add, right? And that's what we've got here, a weekly cycle low. We've added the position. You already know about this, I've shown you a million times, right? And until such time as it's out, then everything in the middle is no man's land, right? It doesn't matter. Something else, which is extremely left curve, but works perfectly well for me personally, is a simple log trend line, okay? It doesn't take a genius to look at this and say we're still making higher highs and higher lows. Now, I know when you've got an asset as volatile as Bitcoin, it can be quite difficult to sit through the drawdowns. And I know this isn't much use, okay, because 49k is essentially a 50% decline, more than 50% from top to bottom, right? But the reality is, until we trade below that, then we're still making higher highs and higher lows, particularly on the weekly time frame, right? Here's the weekly. And I know that if we get all the way down here and we go, well, that's it, now we're truly in a bear market, okay, then it's kind of too late at that point. I understand it's not really much use, but this is just the reality. When you're trading something as volatile as Bitcoin, until we actually lose 49k, from my perspective, we're still making weekly higher highs and higher lows. And therefore, I can't really be bearish. Is this extremely left curve? Yes. Is Tony's analysis far more thorough and probably more likely to be correct? Yes. But does Tony know any more than I do? No. None of us have a clue, right? This is the absolute truth. All we can do is perform our TA and try to stick to a system. So also notice here, there's a bunch of reasons to be bearish, okay? Everything Tony presented today is totally acceptable, right? It's totally reasonable. It's totally objective. And I have one or two counter arguments, as I've shown you, plus we've got monetary policy aligning, plus we're still making higher highs and higher lows on the weekly. And moreover, okay, my personal trading system has yet to take me out of the trade. We have yet to fail the cycle. And so I can't really react here until we see something actionable. So I hope that clears that up. I hope this can be well received and people can understand that this is really just an intellectual exercise. This is really just two people having a look at the markets, seeing what they can see. We largely speaking agree, okay? But also there's a couple of points that we disagree on. I think that is absolutely reasonable. I'm going to put a link in the pinned comment and the description to this post, and I highly encourage you to go and watch the entire video. Tony also covers things like Ethereum, the total crypto cap, et al. But also you should make sure you hear Tony's side. Don't just take my word for it. Make sure you hear it from Tony himself, because he actually does make an extremely compelling case for why the top may already be in. And if that's the case, then keep in mind, I've missed it, right? I've totally missed it. I am not prepared just yet to start entertaining downside scenarios. So if the top is in, I'm late. And remember, if the top's not in, then Tony can always get back in, right? Tony can always adjust to that as the data starts to improve. So again, I'll link this video in the pinned comment. I'll link this video in the description. Please, please, please go and watch that. Other than that, let us know what you think, right? I hope you found value. I hope this video can be well received and you can understand it comes from a place of pure intentions. And other than that, okay, we're getting through the week. PCE data on Friday should be cold. Maybe conducive to, again, seeing rate cuts put on the table, seeing the bond yields sell off. And if that's the case, then more liquidity, more accommodative monetary policy may well be en route. And until next time, God bless. Cheers. Bye.
Camel Finance, he's the man to see. Rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame. Sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel Finance got the markets key. Taking us normies on a bump.